So let's get started with who and how to record then. So if you could go to the next slide. All right, so let's start with who to record. There's lots of children, hopefully, in your communities that speak whatever language you're looking at. And the question is which children to pick in order to record them. And so you see a selection of various children that we've recorded in our various projects here. So next slide. So to remind you what our goal is for the recording, we want to have a minimum of 2 children for the project if we do it longitudinally, and at 5 ages, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5, and 4, and ideally a mix of genders if that works. And we're going for naturalistic interactions with children and adults to have child-directed speech, and children because that's probably the most natural context that children are in. And then the recording schedule could be longitudinal, and if you do, so that would be the same children at each of the 5 data points, so then you'd need only 2 children, or cross-legged, so that means some children at more than one data point and then some children at other data points, but let's say 2 children at each of 3 data points and the other 2 at each of 2 data points, then you'd need a total of 4 children, something along those lines. Or cross-sectional, so you have different children at every data point, so then you'd need a total of 10 children. And which of those you choose depends a little bit on how much time you have and the availability of the families over time, etc. And then what data to record, you want minimally 10 hours, so 1 hour per child per age, and process 5 hours of that, so 30 minutes per child per age. So that's what we're going for. But in order to achieve this, we of course need some children. So let's go to the next slide. So the ideal criteria for children I've listed here. One very important criterion is that the children are talkative, that they'll produce enough data in the allotted time that you have something to analyze. So this is not to say that talkative children are any better or worse than shy children. It's simply that the goal of your project is to get a lot of data in a limited amount of time, and our experience is that talkative children tend to produce more data. And also, you want to go for children that speak loudly enough that you can hear them well, and that have clear enough pronunciation that you can understand them well. And the reasons for this are that it makes it much easier to understand them and to transcribe the data. So there's nothing more frustrating than having a soft-spoken child that mumbles, and then you're not going to get any useful data, or very little useful data, and it will be a lot of work to get that data. So to the extent you can, go for more talkative children that speak loudly enough and have clear pronunciation. Also, to the extent that you can tell, avoid children with developmental disorders, because our goal in this project is to document the typical development first, so that in a later stage of the project you can compare that with other children, and so that we have criteria for what developmental delay is. You, of course, at this stage can't always tell if someone has a developmental delay. So if you're doing a longitudinal project, then I would suggest it might be an idea to start with 3 or 4 children, because a child might drop out for sure, or you also might find out somewhere along the way that a child has developmental delay. So in my project, I started with 4 children longitudinally, and luckily for me, they all stayed in the project, but turned out that none of them were delayed, but one was precocious and one was not so precocious, and so it was good to have a range of children. I know that in the Cree project, one child did drop out along the way because of having developmental disorders, and so it was good that they had started with more. Obviously, if you're doing a cross-sectional study, then this doesn't matter so much. Okay, so those are the ideal criteria of what we're looking for. Next slide. So how to find these children. There's lots of different possible ways, and what is going to work best is going to depend to some degree on the community that you're involved with and how many families there are and the state of the language and political situation and all those kinds of things. But here are some basic guidelines to get you started. First of all, ask adults in the community which families have children of the right age. So in the community that I worked in, there was only about 300 people. And so there was about, I don't know, 50 families, and there was a limited number of children of the right age. I think there were 6 or 8 children that I could have even worked with. So starting out with those families makes a lot of sense. So asking around which families have children of the right age. And then in many communities, there's sense of which families would be suitable for the project that have appropriate social standing in the community, or that have rich enough language use that this could be especially an issue in communities where there's language endangerment, and some families are seen to have more strong speech than other families. In the community where I worked, there were a number of children adopted by their grandparents. That was fairly typical. And so one of the children in my project had very strong language use because he had input from his grandparents who were older and thus considered better speakers. So those kinds of factors, depending on your community, may come into play. And then, of course, which families have time to participate, because not everyone does, or inclination to participate. Not everyone will be interested in a project like this. So adults in the community that you know should be able to give you information like that. And then also ask which children are suitable for the project. So which ones have what the community considers good language abilities, which ones have delays. So those are ones you might want to avoid. Which children are outgoing, which children like interacting with people, which children like talking, which children are afraid of the camera, all of those kinds of things that adults in the community should be able to tell you. Then you can, of course, observe children by yourself, observe children in interaction. So playing on the playground near where you are, hanging around the school, wherever, various community situations where you encountered them, and figure out which ones are loud enough that you can hear them well, which ones have clear pronunciation, which ones are talkative, which ones interact easily with others. So use your own observation or that of others on your team as well to try to target particular children that you think might be suitable, and maybe ask people in the community, would their family be appropriate for this study? And then depending on the situation, you could also advertise or ask around. So you could advertise on the local radio station, in the newspaper, in community meetings, posters, word of mouth, any kind of advertising that's suitable in your community situation. So an advantage of that is that it helps ensure that all families have the opportunity to participate. In some situations, let's say you're working with a research assistant in the community who maybe is only going to recommend their own friends or their own relatives, and that means that other families feel excluded. Some advertising could help to ensure that other people are able to be involved. So which ones of these situations, these tips are going to work best for you is going to depend totally on the community. If it's a smaller community, there may be more political issues that you have to think about. If it's a very large community, so I have a student right now who is collecting data in the capital city of Mongolia that has 1 million people, then advertising might be an appropriate method. So figure out from these what are appropriate methods for your community. Next slide. Once you've identified some families, of course, you want to meet with them and see if they really want to be involved. So then you want to meet with each prospective family and explain your project and how the family would be involved, how data is collected, what the taping schedule would be if you're going to tape more than once, what the goal of the project is, the goal of the taping, what kinds of interactions you're looking for, all of those kinds of things so that they know what to expect and what would be involved if they agree. And explain who else would be involved from your side. So are you planning to be there and do all the taping, or will you have people working with you, assisting you in data collection or assisting you with the equipment or whatever, all those kinds of things. And also who you hope would be involved from their side. So you're not just looking at the child has to be talking to someone. And since we're also focusing on child-directed speech, then there should be an adult involved that typically interacts with the child, the mother, the father, the grandparent, the babysitter, whoever, but explain who would be involved from their side, and also probably other children that the child plays with, the other siblings. And if there's a lot of people involved in the family situation, then you might also want to be saying something like, we should constrain the people there during the taping so that there's not, like, if there's 15 people walking in and out, it's going to make the transcribing very problematic and maybe not focus on the child's language. So you might not get enough language during the taping session. So depending on your community, those kinds of things should be talked about so the family knows what they're getting into, and give them lots of opportunity to ask questions, of course, and to answer those questions. And then I have here a few tips from Maria Bardaggi, who I see has joined us today. So that's great. So you can say more about this. One is take someone with you who's already been involved in the project, because it's really nice for a new family to hear personal experience from someone that they know and trust in the community, so they can talk about what it's been like for them and what was a surprise or what was expected or what the other person should be thinking of or whatever. Then another idea is to take a video of another child, of course, with their permission, to show the family what the taping will be like. So what it would be like to see their family on tape and what kinds of situations you're going for, etc. And also to discuss specific activities or areas of the house that they would want to avoid for privacy reasons, or that you should be thinking about or whatever, or to ensure that visitors aren't unwillingly caught on the tape without their consent, or those sorts of things. So I hope that Maria will be willing to talk about this after we present these slides, but I thought these were super helpful tips. Thank you. Okay, so I think that's all I want to say about who to tape and how to find them. I'm sure you have lots of questions and we can talk about that later. Let us now move to the next slide, which I think is where to tape. Yeah, where to record. So here are some different recording situations. The bottom right-hand corner is from my data, and I recorded everything inside because I worked with Inuit in the north of Canada. So outside much of the year, it's very cold. So that doesn't work because, well, first of all, your taping equipment shuts down. And also it's very windy often outside, so that wasn't great. So I did all of my taping inside in typical family interactions. This is the boy in red is my target child, and the boy in blue is his older brother. The other two taping situations, the one in the top right corner is, these are both from Papua New Guinea, from Kakat, and the top corner is near a house with the mother reading to her child, and the bottom corner is in the family garden, which is a very typical situation. So depending on the situations in your community, you should think what are the typical situations where people interact and what are ones that are going to be suitable for getting good recordings. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So our ideal criteria include natural or naturalistic data, authentic interactions in familiar situations, that are representative of typical activities. So those might be things like play or meals or helping with chores or reading or working in the garden or a whole variety of things depending on your community. So you should figure out what those are. But what we're going for in the sketches are natural, authentic situations, not contrived situations. Like, sitting on the floor playing with a particular set of toys. If that's what people normally do, then great. But if it's not, then not. And then ideally a variety of interlocutors. So we certainly want to have caregivers to be able to document the child-directed speech, but also peers and siblings and grandparents and aunts and uncles and whoever. However, a guideline would be ideally not too many people at once, because the more people you have, the more difficult it is to transcribe the data, and also probably the less chance that child themselves will have to be talking. If there's a lot of other people talking, they may not talk so much. And what we want is to maximize the amount of speech of the child and the caregiver. And then also think about background noise. So ideally, you don't want any background noise, because any background noise makes it more difficult to transcribe. So our human brain tends to factor out this background noise, but tapes don't tend to factor it out, unfortunately. So things like wind in the background, or the dishwasher going in the background, vehicles passing by on the street, nearby conversations, animals barking or meowing or whatever. All of those things our brain doesn't pay attention to, but will be very present for you in the recording. And so try to, as much as you can, avoid situations where there's wind or dishwashers or whatever, to make it easier to transcribe. So you see here the continuing pattern. What we're going for is something with lots of speech of the child, lots of speech of the caregiver, and easy to understand and easy to transcribe. And all of the factors that you're thinking about should maximize those goals. Okay, next slide. So how do you decide on recording contexts? So there's lots of places you could record. And again, you can ask adults in the community and the families involved, what are typical activities of the children at what times of day? So what do they normally do? What does a typical day look like? Also, in what context do children typically interact with each other? So, or with other people in general, because what you want is them interacting, them speaking. So there's no point in having a situation in church, for example, where they're sitting there listening, but not themselves talking or whatever. And who do children typically interact with, so that you can get on tape the people that they most interact with. And also, observing children in interaction is very helpful. So you could accompany the family for some time to get an idea of their activities and schedule, maybe hang around for a day in their house, or a couple of days, or a couple of mornings, or whatever, to see what are going to be the best times to get the most data, and see who the child interacts with well, and then see if they can be available for the taping sessions. And see what contexts facilitate interaction that yields good language. By good, I mean any language, I guess, just speaking contexts that facilitate that the child speaks. So again, the overriding principle, you want the child to talk a lot. Okay, next slide. Then other factors to consider. People with whom recording is not appropriate. So there may be rules or traditions in your community about people from the community interacting with non-community members, or people of different genders, or people of different statuses. So then you need to obviously take those into account in terms of who's going to do the actual data collection, or who would be the interlocutors for the child. If there's rules around non-community members interacting, then you could consider hiring an appropriate community member to record the data, or even consider having the family record themselves. Then locations or situations where recording is not appropriate or easy. So I recorded always in the home, and I found that very straightforward, but you could also consider non-home locations if the home is too open or there's too many other people there that you'd have to not include in the tape or whatever. So for example, a community center, a school, an outdoor setting that's relatively quiet. Um, if it's difficult to create an interactional situation naturally, you could consider setting up a play situation by maybe providing toys or providing food um, to help the child open up and to help create more interaction. And obviously, you want to make sure to respect the privacy of the family and of the community by not recording in any situations that might be compromising. And then you want to think about the context. So either you could record all recordings in the same context, which is what I did, everything in the home, and that gives some consistency across your recordings and also comparability because everything's in the same context. So when you're looking across the different ages, the difference wouldn't be, here I recorded at home and there I recorded outdoors playing. Everything would be at home, and so the data is to some extent more comparable. Another option is to record in different contexts. So in the Qaket context, Birgit explicitly recorded some things in the home and some things in the garden to get more representativeness of the children's typical situations and also get more diversity. There's no right or wrong answer here. The question is simply what will get the most data, what's the most representative, what's suitable for your community, what is doable for you in the context, what do you feel comfortable with. There's no, none of our recordings are ever going to be perfect, and there's no right or wrong answer. So whatever feels good for you, go with your intuition, as long as you're getting lots of data that's clear and easy to transcribe. Okay, I think that's all I have to say. So now we can move to how to record.
Great, thank you so much, Shanley. So yes, the kind of technical details of how to record. That's what I was going to talk about. And so keep losing the focus on the slideshow so that it isn't progressing. So there's a few kind of ideal things that you're looking for in how to record, and actually they're contradictory. So you're looking for high quality audio and video, so things like a high sample rate, limited wind noise, good lighting, ideally one microphone on each person located close to their mouth, and for the video to have everyone clearly visible in the video frames, so at a good distance so that you can see them clearly and you can see everyone. And you also want the camera on a tripod so that it's not being bumped around, and with as little kind of movement or panning or zooming of the frame as possible so that that facilitates any kind of analysis of gesture or other kind of analysis of the video that you want to do. But even that is already contradictory, because to have everybody visible in the video frame at all times, they're likely going to be moving around. You're going to have to be moving that camera. And then it gets really contradictory when you look at, you also want it to be, the recording set up to be comfortable and non-restrictive. So you want it not to draw attention. So you don't want the recording set up to be the focus of the talk. And ideally you want the participants to be able to potentially forget that the camera or the microphone is there, so that you can just go on talking as naturally as possible with as little concern about the recording as possible. You don't want the recording to be restricting their activity. So limiting how the children can move, what they can do. You don't want it to be irritating, to be uncomfortable for the children, all of these things. And then, that means that the children are going to be moving around out of the video frame, all these things. And it's, so you've got these different ideals pulling you in different directions. And also, while you don't want it to be too much of a focus for the participants, you want the recording setup to be clearly visible so that other people aren't unknowingly being recorded if they come along the recording setup. Okay. So I wanted to talk about some kind of details of how to do that and ways of balancing these different ideas. So generally, the recording equipment and overall recording setup will vary a lot depending on your context and what you're trying to do. So one thing that's really common is to have a single video camera with a shotgun mic attached. This is on a tripod, which gets a kind of broad view of the recording space. And to have individual microphones on each of the children so that you're getting kind of higher quality audio recording for those focus children. This shotgun microphone then provides a kind of backup audio of the general space or people who might not be near those focus children. And you can, if you want to have a second video camera catching more, which is kind of more mobile and can be used to get more detail or cover people when they're moving more out of the frame. There's different ways you can set that up depending on your context and what you're trying to do. So, as I said, children who are able to walk will not stay near a stationary microphone. They're going to be moving, and so your setup needs to be able to cope with mobile children. And one really good way of doing this is having the audio recording device on the child. And then it needs to be lightweight and secured in a small, comfortable bag or vest, and ideally have the microphone positioned close to the child's mouth. And then there's a few ways that can be done. But first, kind of one of the other goals here is kind of neutralizing the presence or the bothersomeness of the microphone. So this is exactly what you don't want, is something sticking out right in front of the child so that they're grabbing it and paying a lot of attention to this microphone. This is a little still camera that I used, which I'll show more of later. The microphone's hidden in the bag. The child ignored that, but spent a lot of time focused on these little cameras. And so it's really good to cover the microphone, make it invisible, untouchable, so that the child isn't touching the microphone and you're getting the noise of that on the recording, and ideally to have it not easily removable by the child. So some ways you can do that. You've probably heard of Lena. These are fantastic devices that can record for up to 24 hours and come with a lot of pre-processing and a lot of excellent tools which can be used for analyzing the data. One downside is that they can be quite expensive, and they are set up for these day-long recordings, which is great in many contexts, but in other contexts it's not really feasible for families to be doing day-long recordings. And so if that's your case, for your context, it's not something that you necessarily need to go for. Some other options are this kind of standard microphones. So on the left, we have wireless transmitters with receivers. So you have a little lapel mic, which is down the bottom here. And this can be clipped into a little strap close to the child's mouth. And the transmitter then goes on the back and it's a receiver elsewhere. Another way I've done it is with this little Zoom H1. So this is a little recorder with a microphone. You put a windsock over the microphone to help with wind noise, and then put this on the child's chest. Some ways to set it up so that it's not easy for the child to remove and is more comfortable. Buckle clips are really useful. They're hard for children to undo, and it's easier to set up an adjustable fit so that you can fit it to different sized children. And you really want this recording device to be securely placed so it's not easily removable out of the bag. And there's different ways you can do this. So you can adapt a pre-made bag. There's lots of these small backpacks, like toddler harness leash bags. You've got to remove the leash, but these often come in cute little designs, and are nice child-sized bags. And so Lucy Davidson has made a range of fantastic kind of homemade bags, which are similar. They're just small pouches that fit the transmitter in the back. And so the transmitter goes inside the bag, which is then Velcroed shut, and you get the lapel mic in this little Velcroed pocket, which is then protected there. And you have padding all around the bag, which helps protect everything. And then here you can see it in action. You've got the little lapel microphone close to the child's mouth and one of the straps, and the transmitter is in the back, and it goes to this receiver with the video camera. One great benefit of this kind of setup is that the audio gets automatically aligned with the video, and so you've got all streams getting aligned together, and also you can listen to the audio while you're doing the recording. Another one that I've done is a bit less fancy. It's these little bags that I made. It's a similar design in a way. You've got a small pouch, but this was for the Zoom H1, so you just put the recorder in there, and then this goes on the child's chest. So you can see here the foam. So this is the padding to help protect against the wind noise, and also to make it more comfortable for the child and protect the recorder. And here there were just these ties which threaded through loops to secure around the child and get an adjustable fit. And I was also using this little still camera, which I'll come back to later, and set a little slit there for that to fit through. And so I was wanting kind of more on the child's chest so that I could use this still camera. Another system that Lucy used was these small little bags, which just kind of wrap around the Zoom H1s and then have a little buckle, and then you can put those, sling those around the child. And she found that actually she wouldn't recommend these because they were too irritating for the child on the chest, and so they ended up getting slung on the child's back, which is then having the microphone a bit further away from their mouth, so it's not really ideal. So you can see these in action here. They ended up being slung on the child's back. With the video camera, it's another thing where it tends to get a lot of focus in the recording setting, and this can make people self-conscious and do all sorts of things. It also can be a real focus for the children wanting to interact and play with the camera. Some things that we found help with this are to invite the child to get familiar with the camera, see how it works, understand how it's working. Also to get family members to take charge of video camera, so that it's not you as the researcher. I am with some of the focus children I recorded in Australia. And another thing that worked really well for me is, particularly with some children, to give them an extra video camera. So to have another small video camera, which wasn't the main video camera, which they could use. So it was their video camera and we had one, and then that gave them an extra focus, so they weren't so invested in the main video camera. It's Lucy working with a family who are there using the video camera themselves. And this is, again, Lucy also using the dummy video camera, so with children having their own camera there. Another option, either instead of a separate kind of stationary video camera getting the whole scene, or as well of, is to get visual data from the child's perspective. And this can be done in a few ways. I've seen it done with GoPros. There's also this paper, Sullivan and colleagues, where they used VHO cameras. So this is an image taken from their paper. This VHO camera attached to the child's head with a custom headband, and this then records 2 hours of audio and visual data from the child's perspective, which is another way to do it. And this is, in a way, what I was doing with these still cameras that I mentioned before. So this is what I used. It's called a narrative clip. It's not currently available, but there are a few others in this space, and it may still be possible to get some of the narrative clips that were released. It's this small camera which clips on, which takes an image every 5 seconds, or you can set it to be at different intervals. And then I glued a super fisheye lens onto it and attached it to the child. So this is the one here where this child they were a real kind of focal point where children tended to grab them. And they produce images like this. So this is from the child's perspective. This is the child wearing it. And then you can see what that child's engaging with, what they're looking at. And this was really helpful, often in transcription and data analysis, to have more information about what a child was engaging with, what they were doing in trying to understand some slightly unclear utterances and these sorts of things. The video data is often really helpful for that. So this is kind of mostly what I wanted to say. I just wanted to point to a few little kind of useful tips for reference. So a few kind of useful tools. So I commented, if you're using these audio, so these radio transmitter microphones, that automatically aligns the audio with the video. If you're combining audio and video from multiple sources without that, there's a few ways to do it. One is kind of just old style, director's clap. Make sure you get that in all of your recordings. But there's also some automatic tools which are really helpful for this now and generally do quite a good job. So this is a link to one of them that was produced by Center of Excellence for the Dynamics of Language, which aligns all of your audio and video streams for you. That's really good. Also, if you are using something like those still image cameras, you can align those with the audio and turn it into a video, with a kind of slowly progressing still image. And there's a tool developed by Marissa Casillas to do that. I also highly recommend Marissa and Alex's paper on collecting and analyzing long format speech environment recordings, where they go through a few of the different options for long format recordings. In some cases, it's different to what you might need to do if you're doing a more short form recording, but there's a lot of good tips there. Also in Alex's kind of general kind of guide to these recordings, where she discusses more of the pros and cons of different options and some of the different tools and technologies around analyzing this data and collecting it. Okay. So to conclude, it's only you who knows what the best recording setup is for your particular context. And trial and error is a very valid strategy when finding what works. It's often helpful to try a few different setups and go, oh, actually, this doesn't work. Initially, when I was working on Pittenthar, I'd intended to do long form recordings, and then I found that actually families just weren't willing to do that. They didn't have the inclination. They weren't interested in that. And so shifted to doing shorter form recordings. And Lucy with these little bags, she thought, oh yes, we can put this on the child's chest, that'll work well. And then actually, no, it doesn't. You've got to put it on the child's back, and then you're getting less good audio quality, all these sorts of things. You just need to try and see what works. And the general kind of take home from all of this is that any child language data is better than none. It's the general kind of philosophy here. So even if you have to make some kind of cutbacks in some areas, it's still going to be useful data, and it's worth doing, even if you're going, oh no, I can't get this fantastic phonetic level audio quality, and so I shouldn't do it. It's actually still good to do, even if you have to make a few cuts here and there. So that was all that we wanted to say with the slides. And if you've got any questions or comments, please let us know. I was particularly interested also to hear from Maria, because I know you passed on a few comments to Birgit about collecting data for Tolly Tolly, and so it'd be great to hear from you. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, thank you for the sorry.
Rebecca, can you end the slideshow? So
yes, I can. Henrika.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentations. Wait, I'm just getting my hand down. Yeah, okay. Very interesting and very cool ideas and cool bags. So nice. I have a few, it's not questions, it's rather ideas, like from what I learned now in the last year to be very helpful. And mostly one thing, I've been working with Birgit, and you probably know the approach that we had. We gave the cameras to the families, and you didn't mention that. And I mean, it probably depends very much on where you are and if it works, but I tried it in another community, which are still binding people, but similarly binding. And yeah, it just worked very, very nice again. Because also the technology, I had other technology like it just developed, and Zoom has a new model of the little portable camera. So you just basically click and it's recording. And that combined with a 32-bit flow technology recorder for the children, they have the incredible advantage. They're like something like Tentacle Sync, that there is no clipping, and you can control it from a mobile phone. And it's very, very, very easy. Just they have two switches to use, and then it's everything in their hands. And yeah, of course, it's a trial and error thing, because they would maybe in the beginning you forget that the child has run away and isn't in the same room as the camera. But yeah, I just like the approach very, very much, to put the responsibility and power about what is being recorded into the hands of the families themselves. Yeah, and the recommendation for this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'd meant to mention that camera because it's fantastic. Thank you. And I completely agree. It's often really powerful and really good to hand over the recording to the families. I've done that as well, though I found with the Pindara there was a bit of a tension around them not wanting to be responsible for the recording and liking the setup that we had, where I would take a family out for a picnic and provide food and generally kind of support the family for those few hours, and then the parents could relax, and they didn't want to lose that time. And so that was, I often tried to hand over the recording to the families, and they didn't want to do that, but they were really happy to, if we took them out for a recording session and then they were in control of the camera while we were there. And so I think, and that's one way to get around this kind of observer bias issue of having the researcher there with the camera in your face.
Can I just jump in there? Henrika, did you have a conversation with your parents or caregivers who you gave the camera to about what kinds of data that you wanted? What was the preparation that you gave them before you gave them the camera to be able to record the recordings?
Sorry, I'm using the phone. That's a bit tiny. Yes, definitely. And the conversation got longer and longer with more people. I tried it. And finally, what worked best was showing I had the KAKET videos, and so I could show them, okay, look, this is really nice. Do you see why? And they even understand the children's speech, like part of it. The child speech is quite similar in both languages. Like the simple things, and so they could really see, okay, yeah, here I understand the child, and there, I don't understand the child, and that was really, really helpful. Just examples, and yes, but for all the families, always after they brought the videos back to me, we sat down and watched them the first time together, and said, yeah, okay, and then this is how they learned from it. Like, the most thing is by example. And then I had a very, at the beginning, it was a very short talk piece in, in not how do you say, like just a form where I wrote everything that I considered to be important, but that rather stressed them, and it worked much better when we like worked it out together. Yeah.
Thanks.
Henrika, could you write the information about that camera type in the chat so we can see what it is?
I hope I can. It's very tiny. Yes.
Go. Sorry, you're muted.
Can you hear me now? Is it okay?
Yes, we can hear. Yeah.
Okay. So my question is actually to Shanley, because I'm a bit concerned about selecting the children based on their, talkativity, or based on being talkative more than others, or because I don't know how this may affect the analysis of the results, the quantitative. So maybe there should be some kind of a balance between talkative and non-talkative children, or between, different aspects that may affect or show some non-realistic picture of reality.
Yes. Oh, yes, I totally get what you're going for. Like, if we want a really representative representation of all of the different children in the community, then if you're picking
or at
just
least some average, or some
right.
kind of yeah.
So I think what one wants is, like, there's no point in getting a non-talkative children that doesn't produce any data, because then you can't get any analysis.
Right. But then, for instance, yeah, if you record a low CES child, then there's research that shows that they're usually less communicative, and their parents are less communicative. So maybe you should try to record different kinds of children if you have more than two, and then you see what the differences between them are, so that you understand what the language situation is, and what is actually some kind of bias of the child.
So I totally agree with you. It depends a little bit what your goal is. So if your goal is, if one of the measures you want to take is like number of words produced per minute or something, then this is going to be a problem. But if you're looking at their MLU, or their production of passives, or what's their phonological inventory or whatever, then these things probably shouldn't make that much difference. I don't, maybe production of passives, yes, maybe it'll be more delayed, I don't know. But it depends what your goal is. So if your goal from the outset is to compare different types of children at different FCS levels or different talkativity levels or whatever, then of course you want to compare. If your goal is just to, let's first of all get the basic language structure and basic trajectory, then I would say having too many variables from the beginning is going to just get too complicated and make the project less doable than it would be if you say, okay, for the first pass, I'm going for 2 typical children who talk enough and clearly enough that I can get a transcription. Then I'll get my basic sketch done, and then I can start looking at comparing with other types of children or other SES levels or talkativity levels or whatever. But I just want to get the basic sketch done first. Well, it depends what your goal is, I would say.
Thank you. And one more question, if I may, with respect to the informed consent form. Some parents or some people are a bit hesitant about signing these forms, and maybe when you go to a family, you need to talk to them about the fact that they need to formally agree. Because, for instance, in Uganda, when we tried to recruit a family, they did not really want to sign the form. They were afraid or whatever. So I think this also needs to be taken into consideration. Formalities are
Our next workshop is going to be about ethics, and it would be very useful if you could send us a short email with the situation that you face, so we could try to include that already from the beginning and address that next time. But yeah, I agree that one has to be very sensitive to what the community take is and the norms in the community are around ethics and agreeing to things.
You know, parents are suspicious and they are afraid. They don't want to sign things, so it's kind of
yeah, it is. I think we'll have to put that to the next time. And in the interest of time, I would like to hear from Maria.
And also, I was wondering about taking pictures or filming minors, because in Israel, for instance,
exactly,
to take video clips of children, you know, with their face.
Yeah, that's another issue for ethics that we're going to come to next time. Yeah, Maria.
Hi, thank you. That was very helpful. I had a question first. In the pictures that you showed, Rebecca, you were there in the recordings, right? So you are there the whole time while you're recording.
So in my data, that varied. So there were some that I was there for the whole time, and others that I set up and then left and came back to. Yeah.
And that doesn't. For me, while I was there, they changed the language and then they tried to speak Indonesian and tried to include me, and it was very difficult to be there. So I ended up not being there. But then this has the disadvantage that you cannot move the camera that much, or that you cannot change the situation.
Yeah.
I don't know how to solve this problem actually.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. And I find as you get more involved with people and their lives and the language, then that reduces. But in some cases, indeed, you being there is too much of a change in how it's not the way they're going to be interacting normally if you're there. And so you do need to not be there. And that's exactly something you just need to work out based on the context and how people interact with you and with each other, and decide there.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. And I don't know, to the point that you mentioned, Henley, I can say something if you want. I went to the field after 4 years of not being able to because of COVID, and I could meet with the families again, which was great because they were very happy to see the videos of their children from 4 years ago. And that was actually the good thing that they realized how the videos looked like. Because I mean, also for me, looking at the videos was that I didn't know how the videos would look like the first time, and it was the same for them. So it was good to see that for the next recording. So it is really, really helpful to show some recordings so that they see, from the space that you record to all the scenes that you record. Some women then asked to cut some parts. For example, one woman said, "Oh, here where I'm breastfeeding, then I don't want to be in the video," for example. And then it was also very helpful to show these videos with the people who had been recorded to another family, because then she said, "Oh, even that you recorded." And then the woman said, "Yeah, we did that and that." And I could say, "Yeah, but if you don't wish this to be recorded, then we can put the camera in this way so that this part of the house is not recorded. And then if you need to, I don't know, change, because at least in Tolitoli, the houses is just one space, and you cannot go into another room in most places. So it's good to say, okay, let's agree that the area is this and so on. So I found it really helpful to show the videos and then to be with another, especially women, because that was the situation there, with another women visiting the new families that wanted to be recorded. Because it's otherwise very difficult to raise concerns. First, because it's difficult to ask me as a foreign researcher not to do something. And second, because first of all, you don't know what it's going to be like, or how long, or how you're going to feel, or so that was something that really helped this time. And actually, while the first time we aimed at recording as much as possible from the space, because you want all to be in the video, and also from the time. With this, you could, I don't know, agree on, okay, you know how it looks. If you want less time, then we can agree on being in this area for this specific time and so on. So it could be more efficient, I think.
Thanks.
That's very good.
No. Okay, thank you all for coming. We've reached time, so I feel I should let you go. I did want to say, so as we'd already said, our next workshop is planned to talk about ethics, so that'll be in December. And then after that, we're looking at processing of the data. And we're just kind of following through the sketch manual so far, taking kind of a short block each time and working through one or two topics. And we were curious if this was a good pace for people, or if they were frustrated that we weren't moving slow enough, or that we were moving too quickly. We had this little survey. I don't know if you've seen it and filled it out already, but if you haven't, it's really just that question: are we moving at the right pace for you? If you want to tick your option there, that would be really helpful. And if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out. You can email the group on the Google group email and ask any questions, and we can have discussion there as well. I think that was all I had to say. Shanley, did you have anything else?
No, I think that's all. If anyone has any last things they wanted to mention?
I just wanted to add, I'm not sure, I came in a bit late, so I'm not sure if you talked about the kind of toys before I came in, but I came in when you were talking about background noise. And from my experience, the toys really make a difference. Like sometimes children have these fancy little kitchens where there is a churning noise when you put a pot on the stove or Velcro. So I found it really important to actually think about the toys before you go and make sure you don't have these squeaky things, because they really get into them, and it's impossible to persuade them to play with something else once they find something that makes noise.
Absolutely. I had a disaster recording where the kids actually had little cars that made noise that are like doo, 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 doo. And it's just, yeah, the whole recording.
Thank you so much.
In that sense, then it's very good to listen to the recordings right away afterwards and maybe play them with the family, so you see that that actually is going to be a problem for transcription, or that you can't hear the child or whatever, because otherwise, you know, our brain tends to factor those things out, to just blend it out, and you wouldn't notice if you're not actually listening to the tape. So I found that a very good suggestion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Wonderful. So thank you very much, and we'll hopefully see you in a couple of months.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.